Imagine a black night. The camp is dead silent. A faint clink of metal and then nothing. The first to sense the enemy isn't a sentry, it's a low, rasping breath close to the ground. Before tanks, drones, or gunpowder, Rome relied on a creature both loved and exploited. Canis pugnax, the war dog. Trained like a soldier ready to hurl itself into spears at the call of its name. But this is not a Hollywood Roman beast story. This is an investigation. Where's the evidence? Who wrote it? And why? Between the lines, we must ask, why did Romans sometimes bury these dogs like family? We'll travel from Epirus to Germania, from roaring arenas to silent ambushes. We'll set popular imagination beside the ladder of evidence and trace the pattern visible across the entire history of the Roman Empire. And we must ask plainly, what does it tell us about humanity when loyalty itself becomes a weapon? From ancient war dogs to modern K9 units in the US, we're looking at two entirely different moral frameworks. We won't conflate them, we'll compare them. If you'd rather hear the evidence, then the special effects stay. Because perhaps the bloodiest thing here isn't tooth or claw, but human choice. Canis pugnax wasn't just a fighting beast. In Rome, it operated as a military doctrine, systematically trained, assigned clear roles, disciplined, and integrated into the Roman war machine. The goal here is to prove through data, not drama in short, separate Hollywood from history. Here's the path we'll take. First, origins and breeding, tracing the Molossos from Epirus to Rome's deliberate crossbreeding strategy, showing how they turned natural advantage into standardized military utility. Next, training and discipline to behave like a legionary, attack only on command, distinguish friend from foe, hold position amid the clash of iron and the smell of blood, unflinching before the chaos of battle. Then there are actual functions patrolling the perimeter, guarding supplies, preventing ambushes, watching over prisoners, tasks that fit the Roman tactical system far better than the arena myth suggests. We'll examine evidence from the Cimbrian campaigns, Caesar's commentaries, and the column of Marcus Aurelius, noting what each says, what each omits, and how trustworthy each really is. Then comes decline and legacy. As warfare changed, their role faded. What remains in breeds like the Cane Corso or Neapolitan Mastiff must be addressed with academic caution, avoiding claims beyond the data. Finally, myth versus evidence, sorting what's certain, what's plausible, and what's poetic invention. And we end with modern meaning and ethics, placing Rome's war dogs beside today's service K9s, two worlds apart, yet both forcing us to ask, what do humans demand of animals when we choose war? By the end of this journey, we'll have enough to ask for ourselves. Does Canis pugnax deserve a place in Rome's memory? Or more importantly, does it deserve to be the mirror reflecting how we build our own myths? Let's begin in Epirus, the rugged mountain region of northwestern Greece, where herds needed bodyguards capable of independent judgment in treacherous terrain. Here emerged the Molossus, a large, sinewy dog with a deep bark, bred not for chasing, but for holding ground, guarding territory and herd alike. Ancient sources like Aristotle, along with later literary references, don't agree on every detail of its appearance, but they converge on one key point. This was a breed selected to guard, block, and deter, rather than to pursue impulsively. In other words, the instinct for purposeful vigilance was already embedded in the herding culture of Epirus. The Romans, masters of practicality, recognized that value early on. They didn't just buy a few dogs for show, they imported them with a clear intent to turn a natural advantage into a replicable capability. For Rome, a strength only became truly useful when it could be standardized with procedures, roles, and predictable outcomes. They saw the molossus not as a mythic beast, but as the starting point of a system. From there, the story evolves. The molossus wasn't copied wholesale into the legions. The Romans selectively crossbred, combining the molossus' protective frame and endurance with traits from local dogs and even war breeds of neighboring peoples. Quicker, bolder, more unpredictable. The goal wasn't to create the biggest dog, but the right behavioral physical profile, strong enough to grapple, fast enough to close in, and mentally steady enough to obey amid the clash of iron and the smell of blood. In short, strong enough to fight, disciplined enough to hold, resilient enough to follow orders, not the fiercer, the better. From this came the seed of a canine doctrine. Breed ABs, train 1, 2, 3, assign XYZ. When units stationed in Dacia and Germania could expect the same behavior, the doctrine had reached operational form. If an advantage couldn't be taught, transmitted, or controlled, Rome rarely kept it for long. For American audiences, think of it as standardization, SOPs, unit cohesion, a pattern visible across the entire history of the Roman Empire and echoed in modern doctrine. Not to equate the two eras, but to highlight a shared mindset. An advantage endures only when a natural gift becomes a repeatable process. Rome did that with roads, bridges, fort design, and yes, with dogs. One often overlooked truth: purpose-driven breeding is a double-edged sword. Push one trait too far, say aggression without balancing it with control, and you get a weapon with no handle. The Romans seem to understand this well. A dog that waits for the order before attacking is strategically worth more than one that charges blindly at shields. Thus, the ancient canine doctrine emphasized stable nerves, resistance to panic from screams, blood, and clashing metal, friend-foe recognition, and positional discipline qualities we now call impulse control and task reliability. It's also worth being candid. No manual of Roman dog training survives. What we have are fragments, hints in texts, figures on reliefs, the logic of castra, military camps, and campaign patterns on the frontiers. But when these fragments are assembled using the principle of what makes sense within Rome's military machinery, a consistent picture appears. Rome didn't domesticate to display, it domesticated to operate. They needed a living tool that could be plugged into their operational chain perimeter watch. Early warning, escort, guard, and deliver predictable results. Finally, notice how Rome changed the context. The molossus was bred to guard herds in the mountains, where threats came from bandits or predators, chaotic, scattered dangers. Rome brought it into a disciplined military environment with scheduled routines, patrol shifts, guard rotations, and supply lines. It was a shift from reacting by instinct to reacting by role. If the molossus was the street artist of protection, then Canis pugnax was the regular soldier of duty. The difference wasn't mostly in muscle, but in the reprogramming of instinct through repetition, restraint, and selective breeding. So when you hear Canis pugnax, don't picture a single monstrous dog. Think of a pipeline. Select dogs by criteria. Test for tasks, remove failures, reinforce command-based reflexes, deploy by role. That's how Rome transformed the natural strength of Epirus into predictable combat capability anywhere the legions marched. At that level of logic, canine doctrine isn't poetic, it's how an empire turned instinct into infrastructure within its military system. Pause inside a Roman amphitheater. The roar of the crowd, the smell of sand and blood, those operas of violence where humans and animals alike were pulled into spectacle. Dogs appeared there because they stirred primal reactions: fear, excitement, the illusion of imperial control. But arena presence is not battlefield proof. Spectacle can be choreographed, not operational. So we must separate two planes: entertainment and operational reality. In the arena, organizers sought peak drama dogs unleashed to hunt unarmed criminals or exotic beasts, sometimes starved or provoked by drums and scent. That was stagecraft, designed to rile the crowd. The battlefield demanded something different. Reliability dogs that obeyed orders, identified friend from foe, and held position amid chaos. Performance thrills an audience. Discipline earns a commander's trust. Second, the missions themselves differed completely. In the arena, a dog's task was to chase, bite, and pull down the faster and fiercer, the better. No need for coordination, formation, or command chains. But on campaign or inside a castra, dogs had to patrol perimeters, give early warnings, escort convoys, and guard prisoners, tasks demanding impulse control and role discipline. A creature that could make a crowd roar might not last 3 quiet hours on patrol without misreading the shadow of a comrade. Third, let's look at the motives behind the sources. Literature and arena descriptions often exaggerate either for moral impact or for aesthetic thrill. The frenzied behavior of wild animals made the perfect motif to condemn or glorify. By contrast, traces of dogs in military functions are discreet, tucked into background details on reliefs, a few words in the margins of texts, or implied through the logic of camp organization. When we see a dog carved beside a soldier, it signals the possibility of their presence, but not proof of a combat unit unless an explicit role is described. The lesson here is about the hierarchy of evidence. A shocking spectacle is not automatically proof of a doctrine. So where is the leap from execution beast to soldier under doctrine? The answer lies in discipline. And discipline meant more than obedience. It meant steady nerves amid chaos, drum, clashing metal, the smell of blood, clear friend-foe recognition by scent, attacking only on signal, and holding position until released. Those traits don't come from starvation and leash yanking. They come from repetitive conditioning, controlled exposure, command-reward correction loops, selective breeding for composure, and role-based deployment perimeter, early warning, escort, guard. Only when such practices repeat across multiple units can we talk about a genuine doctrine in action. You might ask, if these war dogs were so effective, why don't we hear more about them in ancient histories? Because what mattered in warfare wasn't the dramatic moment, it was the unseen reliability. An early warning that prevents an ambush leaves no scene. A night of quiet watchkeeping offers no twist. Those don't make literature, but they form the backbone of security. By contrast, the arena always sought spectacle crafted to look like war, not to function like it. This connects directly with the myth-busting mindset familiar to American audiences, separating the show from the operating system. In U.S. military history, standardization and doctrine determine large-scale effectiveness from logistics to SOPs. Rome thought in the same way, turning a natural advantage into a replicable process. If dogs were merely tools to excite the crowd, they needed no training standards. If they were part of the military machine, they had to be standardized. Finally, let's close one common misconception. The arena was a mirror of the battlefield. No, it was a simulation of war sensations, fear, screams, and blood used for politics and entertainment. The battlefield, on the other hand, was a functioning system of objectives, roles, rules, and real risk. Canis pugnax crossed that line from execution beast to soldier only when it was pulled out of the logic of spectacle and placed into a repeatable operational chain when the Romans believed that on the 100th watch shift, the dog would perform exactly as on the first. That's when the opera of bracelets ended and discipline began. To pull the Canis pugnax out of the blood-soaked chaos of the arena and turn it into a disciplined weapon of war, Rome had to answer one question: how do you turn instinct into discipline? From that question, everything revolved around 4 uncompromising demands: obey orders, distinguish friend from foe, hold position under pressure, and remain steady amid screams, clashing metal, in the smell of blood. First came the language of command. Dogs don't learn grammar, but they learn rhythm. The Romans built a vocabulary of repetition. Short, sharp tones, consistent gestures, and a leash that tightened and released according to fixed rules. 4 core commands never changed, whether in camp or on the battlefield. Walk close, stay at heel, never break formation. Halt, wait, freeze even when chaos erupts. Attack on signal, only strike when unlocked. And release withdraw, let go the instant the command is heard. When handlers rotated or formations shifted, those orders remained identical. No improvisation, only consistency. Next came friend or foe recognition, the hardest part of the doctrine. Night, rain, snow, and mud made visual cues useless. So the Romans trained through scent. Each dog imprinted on the smell of its tent squad, contubernum, armor soaked in sweat, oil from weapons, the musk of shared living. It learned to draw an invisible scent perimeter. Anything outside that familiar circle was suspect. But suspicion didn't mean attack. It waited for the order. Alongside this came a minimalist sound dictionary, a single whistle, a tap on a spear shaft so commands could still cut through the roar of wind and war. The third pillar was chaos immunity. The arena awakened raw instinct. The battlefield demanded impulse control. The dogs were systematically exposed to blacksmith hammers, the rasp of shields, the scent of blood, the shouts of men, firelight, and smoke. The goal wasn't to make them fiercer, but calmer, to train their nervous systems to lock eyes on the handler and ears on command. A dog that holds its ground is worth 10 that charge into nothing. Finally, holding position. In camp, castra, position meant survival. The gap in a perimeter, the blind angle of a watchtower, the narrow path to the granary. Each dog learned fixed patrol routes, scent checkpoints, guard post stances, and the tail lock rule when convoys passed through gates. On the march, holding position meant no breaking formation, no lagging, no darting off at roadside distractions. Covering 30 to 35 kilometers a day was only possible if every creature kept the rhythm. All of this fed into a tight recruit routine. Morning checks, leash, claws, water, then a 10-15 minute drill to set the rhythm. On the march, a steady pace, short halts on signal, drink only at marked points. Dogs carried light packs not for show, but to build the habit of bearing load and to discourage scavenging. At day's end, clean, dry, warm, check cuts, oil paw pads. Then repeat the halt wait drill while tired so the lesson sinks in. Fatigue is no excuse for breaking discipline. Climate and terrain adaptation was the proof test. In Dacia's brutal winters, the priority was preserving the paw pads, grease to prevent cracking, and more frequent short halts for inspection. In the damp cold of Germania, the rule was keep dry, keep warm. Dry bedding, replace wet leashes immediately. In dense forests and marshlands, the dogs drilled on staying close to narrow trails, crossing natural obstacles, and most critically, never darting into brush without command to avoid spikes, traps, or breaking formation. Everything came down to one word, rhythm. When rhythm held, formation held. The entire system mirrored the spirit of a standard operating procedure, SOP daily repetition designed to produce predictable results. There was no hardbound manual, yet the steps were always the same. Pre-march checks, discipline on the road, perimeter patrol rules, guard shift handover, post-march care. But an SOP only lives through unit cohesion, the glue that lets orders flow seamlessly. A dog didn't belong to the camp in general terms. It belonged to a circle of humans. Its primary handler, usually a veteran soldier, a secondary handler, and the tent squad that shared its living space. Their shared scent, rhythm, and commands synced within that circle. So when the primary was absent, the backup could take over instantly, no retraining required. It was instinct contained within the chain of command. Imagine a live field test 10 seconds that say everything. Twilight. The column halts briefly. The wind shifts, an unfamiliar scent drifts in from the forest. The dog stiffens, ears high but doesn't move. A hold command is given, it holds position. A narrow check command follows it, advances 2 or 3 paces on a shortened leash, sniffs, turns back, and signals in the trained stance. A silence order, instant stillness, giving space for the scouts to move in. Detect, wait, check, signal, silence. A clean chain, no barking, no confusion. Not a vicious beast, but a gear that keeps rhythm in the machine. When these 4 pillars of discipline were reinforced daily, the Canis pugnax ceased to be a ball of volatile instinct. It became a predictable component in the military system for perimeter patrol, early warning, convoy escort, and prisoner watch. And when the 100th shift ran as smoothly as the first, the doctrine had achieved its most difficult goal, turning loyalty to operational discipline. Step through the Porta Praetoria as dusk falls. Inside the castra, everything moves by rhythm. The mess distributes rations, the blacksmith hammers iron, sentries rotate their posts. And among that machinery move the 4-legged soldiers, each with a defined role. The outer ring of the camp ditch, palisade patrol path was their domain. They walked fixed routes, paused at scent points to check wind shifts and foreign traces. The rule was simple: detect, wait, signal briefly. No dramatic barking, no noise for show, just the right cue at the right moment so the human guard could respond. On the remote frontiers of Germania and Dacia, one quiet signal at the right time was worth 10 alarms too late. The Harea grain depots and armamentaria arsenals had their own canine layer, a built-in safety valve. Their job was to stand before drama ever began, a nose testing the wind, ears tuned for the click of a lock, eyes fixed on the gate. When doors opened or guards changed, the dogs held a soft block position close enough to deter, disciplined enough not to lunge at those whose scent matched authorized credentials. It was a profoundly Roman idea. The higher the risk, the quieter and more repeatable the safeguard. In detention areas, dogs formed a living perimeter. They didn't need to snarl or attack. Their mere presence shortened the distance between a fleeting thought of escape and the decision to drop it. The release-withdraw command was drilled until it became muscle memory. Close in, halt, disengage on cue. The Romans never gambled their security on lucky instincts. When the wind shifted from the forest toward camp, when rain carried a trace of unfamiliar smoke, when a twig snapped in the dead angle of a watchtower, those tiny anomalies were the T's red thread. A sudden upright stance, a leash tug, a brief signal just enough to make the sentry look the right way. Many peaceful nights never made it into literature precisely because of those quiet early warnings. Off-duty was the space where bond formed. Each dog had its own rations, usually cut from the soldier's stew meat, grain, or marrow bones after the mess. Care was simple but exact. Trim nails, grease paw pads in winter, dry after rain. Never sleep directly on damp ground. Use an old tent mat instead. The dog belonged not to the army as a whole, but to a circle of humans. The primary handler, the backup, and the tent squad, issuing contubernum. The shared sweat, the daily rhythm, the clipped commands all fused into what the soldiers simply called trust. That trust was sometimes acknowledged through small rituals. Some units buried long-serving dogs on the edge of old camps, marking the spot with a scrap of wood. Not with the pomp of a soldier's funeral, but enough to say, "You stood watch with us." Along the cold, endless frontiers, the castra was more than housing. It was a living organism, and these animals were cells in its immune system. Security was never built on heroic moments, but on correct routines repeated without fail. Meals on time so the next shift stayed strong. The dog was just one gear, but a gear that let the entire machine hear what the human eye could not yet see. And on fog-thick nights, when the camp's breathing merged with the forests, you understood why the Romans kept their dogs close to the command tents. Amid all the uncertainties of the frontier, the one thing they wanted to repeat was that single, precise signal from a creature that had become part of the unit itself. The first lessons came from Rome's enemies. The Celts, Scythians, and the Germanic and Briton tribes had long unleashed Hughes's raw instinct, made flesh-charging shields, tearing at ankles, harassing rear lines under fog and moonlight. Rome watched, remembered, and did what it did best: adopt, train, integrate. Not a carbon copy, but a distillation keeping what worked, discarding what couldn't be controlled, and embedding the dogs into a chain of disciplined, human-linked tasks. Once outside the castra, the dog ceased to be a mere sentry. It became a mobile sensor within the marching column. Night was its hour. When the army encamped in a temporary site with the outer line stretched thin as thread and strange scents riding the wind through shield gaps, the dog was the first layer of early warning. It didn't need to howl. A shift in stance, a brief tug on the leash, or a short signal was enough to direct the guard's gaze. In the Roman philosophy of layered security, what a modern American audience would call forced protection, the dog was the outermost ring, thin, flexible, and always ready to buy those few precious extra seconds. Anti-ambush duty was the hardest test of all. In the dense forests of Germania or the valleys of Dacia, attackers often froze in place, waiting for the worst moment to strike. Human hearing dulled by wind, rain, and armor fatigue. A dog's nose did not. It read the wind like a map, picking out unfamiliar sweat, freshly skinned hides, and broken sap. When the formation left the main road for a narrow pass, the dog took the point pair position. Never passing its handler, never lagging, sweeping scent within a tight perimeter. One leash tug before a bend could mean the difference between a column passing safely or breaking apart under surprise attack. On convoy protection, the pattern changed. Wagons were slow, heavy, perfect targets for ambush. Dogs were assigned to choke points front, middle, ear, keeping an even pace to prevent gaps in security. The rule was simple. Nose reads the wind, eyes scan strangers' legs, ears track the offbeat clang of metal. Any small anomaly triggered an immediate flag. Together, these behaviors formed a kind of field SOP. At each water halt, a living perimeter of 2 or 3 dogs. At a temporary gate, a soft block posture. When a wagon strap was being cut in the dark, a short signal flared before the saboteur could slip away. With wounded soldiers, dogs became a buffer zone, not miracle workers, just a few safe paces of order between the stretcher line and the curious crowd, between the field tent and outsiders. The heel and wait commands took priority to keep the human flow clean, stretchers moving, surgeons undisturbed. In modern terms of force protection, this was the inner layer reducing collisions, intrusions, and panic precisely when humans were most likely to lose control. Yet threats didn't only come from the forest. Inside or near the camp, chaos could spark from drunkenness, arguments, or panic when rumors spread. At close range, the dog was a psychological wedge, close enough to deter, disciplined enough not to bite. Step forward, half a pace, hold step back, half a pace, 3 beats, like a metronome often calmed a crowd before a sword ever left its sheath. Suppression didn't always need blood. Sometimes it just needed a steady stare in a tight leash. On long marches, rhythm was king. A column covering 35 kilometers a day was always tired, always at risk of losing tempo. Each dog had to maintain the 3 no's. No breaking formation at distractions, no lagging on rough terrain, no veering off at strange calls. Before every leg, a short neural warm-up drill heel, halt, silence, release, reset the pattern. After each march, paws, claws, and skin were checked so that no small cut turned into a serious problem. That's how Rome preserved the reliability of its living sensors, day after day. Most critical of all was human-canine coordination. The primary handler and the backup shared the same command dictionary, the same habits of leash tension and release, even the same breathing rhythm when signaling. When shifts changed, there was no signal drift. This was Rome's early form of unit cohesion, the glue of a formation where every component, even the 4-legged ones, moved to the same conductor's rhythm. Because if commands changed, tempo changed, and signal shifted, every olfactory advantage would collapse into chaos. Rome's enemies taught that dogs could be primal weapons. Rome answered with discipline. They didn't unleash dogs into the woods to let instinct rule. They wired them into a force protection grid. Outer layer for early warning, marching layer for escort, gate and store layer for guarding, and inner layer for order. When all layers synchronized, Canis pugnax was no longer a beast. It was a fire alarm line, running half a beat ahead of the human mind, just far enough to let the legion avoid the first arrow. It begins with a memory that refuses to fade. 101 BCE, the Cimbri. When the Roman palisade line was breached, the dogs did not retreat. They clung to the stakes, bit at shields, locked onto legs, and fought until they collapsed. Next came Caesar's campaigns in Gaul and Britannia. Many tribes were noted to keep watchdogs an early warning layer in the foggy nights where human eyes failed. The key insight isn't how fearsome the dogs were, but how Rome responded: adopt, train, integrate. They didn't copy savagery. They distilled what could be standardized sentry duty, ambush prevention, convoy escort, perimeter order. No full manual survives, but the logic of the Castra patrol routes, shift rotations, gate and storehouse protocols shows that the dog's roles align neatly with the daily security needs of the Legion. Not 4-legged special forces, but cogs within a layered defense system. Then we reach the column of Marcus Aurelius, a visual fragment that makes viewers want to shout, the decisive proof. But slow down. Roman iconography had its own grammar. A dog might symbolize vigilance, vigilantia, loyalty, fees, or order, ordo. It could also depict a literal moment, dogs marching beside soldiers. Or it could serve both, documentation of reality and a political moral emblem. A cautious reading is that the image supports frequent presence, but is insufficient to claim the existence of a formalized combat dog unit as cinema often imagines. To move beyond speculation, one must cross-reference reliefs with texts and with Castra logistics. Only when all 3 align does a conclusion hold weight. To avoid Hollywoodizing the past, place each clue on an evidence ladder. Read slowly for voiceover. Contemporary texts, literary sources that record dogs at camps or in battle. Strength, direct context. Weakness, rhetoric and bias. Material evidence, inscriptions, reliefs, archaeology. Strength, visible artifacts. Weakness, symbolism can dominate literal reading. Operational logic, Castra SOPs, patrol lines, gate and store procedures. Strength, checks whether a dog's role fits the workflow. Weakness, inferred rather than stated. Comparative evidence, how Rome's enemies used dogs and what Rome learned. Strength, tactical plausibility. Weakness, risk of overextension without other evidence. When these rungs harmonize, instinct and legend become verifiable history. That ladder is where the myth ends and disciplined history begins. each rung turning instinct and legend into something verifiable, one layer at a time. When all four rungs of the evidence ladder harmonize, what emerges is not a sensational tale but a solid picture. Dogs were present as layers of early warning, perimeter guard, escort for convoys and the wounded, and order enforcement to prevent disorder near the camp. Their value came from reliable repetition, not from blood-soaked heroics. The academic debate centers on questions still open: scale and systemization. How many units kept dogs on permanent duty? Was there an army-wide model or just local practice? Existing data are too fragmentary to map distribution. Offense versus defense. Beyond guard, escort, early warning duties, is there solid evidence for dedicated attack dog units? So far, no hard proof supports the idea of highly organized assault teams. Symbolism of reliefs. How much is metaphor? How much is reportage? These must be read within the grammar of Roman iconography, not as literal snapshots blown up from the field. Genetic legacy. The link to breeds like the Cane Corso or Neapolitan Mastiff exists at the level of influence and fragmentation, not as a pure bloodline surviving 2 millennia. If we were to condense it all into one fair statement, dogs did not decide battles, but they reduced the margin of error. One early warning before a forest bend, one correct posture at a gate, one soft perimeter around a field hospital, each shaved off a percentage of risk. History seldom mentions them because the best thing they produced was often nothing happening. A quiet night, a smooth march, a gate closed on time. Yet that very nothing was the signature of Canis pugnax in Rome's record, a silent gear keeping the entire machine in rhythm. Looking back at the 3 cases, the Cimbri, Caesar's campaigns, and the column of Marcus Aurelius, we don't see a supernatural legend. We see a consistent logic. Rome's enemies revealed the dog's potential. Rome turned that potential into trainable, repeatable, dependable practice. And where serious history meets discipline, this 4-legged story stands firm not by its roar, but by its order. The story of Canis pugnax is not told to glorify violence, nor to romanticize the use of animals in war. The Roman arena was an entertainment industry built on systematized suffering. Ancient campaigns were engines of attrition of human and animal lives alike treated as expendable material. If history is a mirror, this section of it is streaked with blood, and we have to look directly at it. The first point that must be clear is the difference in eras. Ethical standards, animal protection laws, and humane training protocols simply did not exist in ancient Rome. This was a society that could bury a long-serving dog with honors as a comrade, yet also throw others into the arena to fuel a few minutes of frenzy for the crowd. Both facts are true. Together, they reveal a civilization that placed order, power, and state control above the bodies of humans and animals alike in a way that the 21st century can no longer accept. Therefore, a clear statement on animal welfare is mandatory for this video. We describe these practices to understand, not to endorse violence against animals. All historical examples are presented for academic analysis only, not for shock value. And when we later reference modern working dogs or K9 units in the United States, we must remember that this is a completely different context with different goals, legal frameworks, welfare standards, and systems of independent oversight. They are not equivalent to ancient Rome. The hardest question lies right on that thin boundary. When does admiration for discipline turn into numbness? It's easy to be impressed by a system that could turn instinct into procedure, chaos into reliability. But in the very moment we marvel, we also have to ask, what was the cost and who paid it? In many Roman contexts, the answer was the same: the powerless prisoners, slaves, and animals. Acknowledging that doesn't weaken the scholarship. It keeps us honest with the evidence. We also need to draw a sharp line between understanding and forgiving. To understand why Rome used dogs for tactical, logistical, and layered security reasons does not mean forgiving the cruelty of the arena or the brutality of certain practices. Serious history means trying to grasp the internal logic of a society and then holding that understanding up against today's moral framework. Without that balance, we risk sliding into two dead ends, either mythologizing the past to glorify it, or condemning it so completely that we stop thinking. Both make our understanding poorer. So what ultimately is the ethical meaning of Canis pugnax? It forces us to look again at the relationship between humans and loyalty. When loyalty becomes a tool, where is the line between training and abuse? In the ancient world, the answer leaned toward efficiency and order. In the modern world, we add dignity and welfare. Placing those two answers side by side doesn't give us a ready-made moral lesson. It gives us sensitivity, the ability to call violence by its name, to respect living beings, and to stop at the right time. No doctrine lasts forever, and neither did Canis pugnax. Its decline didn't happen overnight. It was a long slope shaped by shifting wars, changing geopolitics, and evolving weapons and tactics. The first breaking point was tactical. As Rome moved into an era of fixed frontiers, lines of forts, watchtowers, and military roads, the enemy's tactics changed as well, smaller, faster raids, with fewer opportunities for large formations or heavy escorts. Roles like convoy protection, gate security, and early warning still mattered. But as human patrols, mechanical devices, and fortification systems grew denser and more sophisticated, the dog's strategic importance began to fade. The second breaking point came with weapons and firepower. As catapults, heavy crossbows, and later complex siege systems became standard, the value of a living barrier or psychological shock diminished before weapons with greater range and force. On the march, better logistics, scouting units, and convoy organization created new layers of protection. Dogs still had their place, but no longer as the irreplaceable piece in Rome's great security machine. The third breaking point was geopolitical. As borders shifted and units were redeployed in erratic cycles, supply lines tightened, and budgets and manpower could no longer be evenly distributed across every gear of the machine. Practices that required constant care and labor, like maintaining standards for military dogs, were the first to be trimmed or delegated to local improvisation. Standardization began to erode. Over time, breeding blurred the original profile. As the dog's purpose drifted from military use towards civilian and agricultural life, breeding priorities changed. Less sensitivity to the scent of blood, less attachment to formation discipline, more gentleness in village environments. The pure martial line faded, leaving scattered traces across multiple branches. So what remains and how much of it? The cautious answer: certain physical traits, frame, bone muscle structure, and a few behavioral echoes. Guarding instinct, the standby for command and posture, a low activation threshold when awaiting orders, may survive in modern breeds like the Cane Corso or Neapolitan Mastiff. But this is heritage without hype. Don't imagine a direct bloodline stretching unbroken across 2 millennia. The history of dog breeding is a maze of crossbreeding, selection, and adaptation. What we can speak of is probable influence, scattered fingerprints, not a one-to-one copy. If we need a fair metaphor, Canis pugnax is the root note in an ancient chord no longer loud, but still coloring the modern harmonies. When the doctrine fades, what remains is how Rome taught us to turn instinct into system. And that lesson, though it no longer bears fangs, still has value for every complex organization. History is the discipline of doubt. Loving Rome is good, mythologizing Rome is not. Every time a meme or a movie scene sends a chill down your spine, ask, what's the source? What kind of evidence? What logic underlies it? If the answers hold up under the weight of documentation texts, artifacts, Castra logistics, in comparison with Rome's rivals, we keep them. If not, we set them aside as beautiful but hollow moments. A fair tone means this: don't downplay what the dogs truly accomplished, reducing risks, buying time, maintaining camp rhythm, but don't inflate them into superweapons either. That balance makes the story more believable, and it also makes the quieter virtues, discipline, process, patience, all the more admirable than the spectacle itself. If Hollywood gives us the feeling of war, history gives us its function. Canis pugnax endured not in legend, but in all those moments when nothing happened because a signal arrived on time. And sometimes that's the most important kind of victory. In the end, the story of Canis pugnax isn't really about Rome, it's about us. About what we call loyalty, how we systematize it to serve order, and the price we're willing to pay when we turn loyalty into an instrument. In Rome, a dog standing by for command amid steel and blood was the emblem of discipline. In our era, we add new variables to that equation: dignity, welfare, and responsibility toward a being that cannot speak our language. If we need a closer mirror, look at today's canine units, service dogs and therapy dogs. The context, mission, and ethical framework have changed profoundly. Their purpose is rescue, protection, and human recovery paired with humane training standards, independent oversight, and post-service care. There is no place for arenas, no place for violence as entertainment. And when we speak of dogs working alongside veterans or first responders in the United States, what we owe them is respect, not an unbalanced comparison with the ancient world. The link between past and present isn't four-legged warriors. It's the moral question. What do we expect from loyalty? And how do we make sure that expectation never crosses the line? So when we look back at Canis pugnax, what remains isn't awe at its fangs, but a reminder of limits. Discipline is admirable only when paired with dignity. Order has meaning only when it doesn't crush the weaker. Telling Rome's story helps us understand the present to know what deserves preservation and what we must firmly leave behind. Does Canis pugnax deserve a seat in Rome's memory? Yes, if placed in context and seen against the entire history of the Roman Empire, not only its loudest scenes, doctrine and discipline. Rome turned instinct into system-short commands, repeated habits, reliable behavior under stress, war and camp life. Dogs didn't decide battles, but they cut risk, bought time, and kept the march moving from perimeter to convoy, from alarms to camp order. Legacy and ethics. Genetic echoes may survive, but the clearer lesson is moral. Don't mythologize violence. Always remember dignity when we talk about loyalty. If we had to end with one line, we tell the story of the dog to understand the story of the human about power, fear, and loyalty. And when you leave this story, I hope you carry a small compass to love history with clear eyes and to love the present with respect for every living being that stands beside humanity in its hardest moments. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What's one thing pop culture gets wrong about Rome? If you've served or worked with canines, what did loyalty look like to you without breaching OPSEC? Drop a comment below with sources if you have them. Evidence is always welcome here. If you found this fact versus fiction approach helpful, please like, subscribe, and share this video with fellow history enthusiasts. Your support helps us keep making episodes grounded in real sources, committed to animal welfare, and true to the myth-busting spirit all the way through. See you in the next episode.